Good morning, everyone. Today is Thursday, April 16th, 2020. It's approximately 10:05 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thank you again for joining us on our daily podcast. We do have the Family Law Matters legal panel with us as usual. I will give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. And then today we're going to be talking about annulments. We'll walk you through what is an annulment, what's the process, and other issues that are related to an annulment. I do want to remind the viewers that as you come in, please make sure that you are muted. If you do have any questions, feel free to email them to us, or you can send them via chat on Zoom directly, and we'll get those answered. With that said, let's get started. So Gina, tell us about yourself.
Sure. My name is Gina Famularo, and I am a partner at Family Law Matters. I've been a family law attorney for 22 years. I've practiced both in Orange County and Riverside.
Thank you, Gina. Christy?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Christy Bergamo. I'm a senior attorney here at Family Law Matters. I have been practicing for 17 years exclusively in family law. I'm also an instructor of paralegal studies at the University of California, Riverside.
Thank you, Christy. Colleen?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Colleen Robinson. I'm a family law attorney here at Family Law Matters. I've been practicing for now 10 years. Mostly in San Diego County and here in Riverside, as well as making appearances all throughout Southern California.
Thank you, Colleen. I am attorney Bishoy Shahada. I'm the managing partner here at Family Law Matters. I've been an attorney for a little over 2.5 years, and family law is all I know as usual. So let's get to it. Gina, what is an annulment?
That's an excellent question, Bishoy. An annulment is a legal proceeding between a husband and wife. It is an action that declares the marriage invalid.
Okay, so what's the legal result of an annulment then?
The legal result is though the marriage never occurred. So what it does is it declares that for some reason, when the parties consented to the marriage, when they went through the marriage process, there was something in the process that was broken. And so the vows never stuck. They never became valid vows. The marriage never existed. So what it does is it goes back in time and it determines that the marriage is no longer there. It doesn't exist anymore.
And how is that different from a divorce?
Sure. When a party goes through a divorce, it's a legal proceeding between a husband and wife, just as it is with an annulment. And when I say husband and wife, I'm using that word generically, of course, because in California, there's same-sex marriages. So either way, divorce is a legal proceeding between two spouses that breaks the marriage. It divides the parties, it divides their property, it divides their lives so that they can go on in the future as separate entities. They're no longer a couple. An annulment breaks the marriage, but it does so retroactively. It goes back to the date that the vows were initially taken, and it declares that the marriage never happened. So it severs the relationship, but going backward in time.
And how long does that process take for an annulment?
Sure. It's on average, it is a 3 to 6 month process. A divorce can be somewhere between a day to several years. A divorce can happen in a way where the parties can agree, whereas an annulment has a very strict process that it must proceed through in order to occur. So I would say 3 to 6 months.
So you mentioned 3 to 6 months, and I know in a divorce proceeding that there is a waiting period of 6 months and a day. Is there a waiting period for the annulment as well then?
No, there's no waiting period for an annulment. There is what we call a residency requirement, which is similar, meaning that you do have to be living in the state of California for a period of time. You do have to be living in the county for a period of time. But in a divorce, we have something, as you mentioned, called a waiting period. And what that is a period of time where the parties have a cooling off period, and they can change their mind and they can actually restore their marriage before the court determines that their marriage is finally and completely broken. In an annulment, since the court is determining that the marriage never occurred, there is no waiting period because there is no need for the parties to cool off in order to save the marriage because there never was a marriage to begin with.
And is there a time limit for filing for an annulment?
Well, that's another great question and one that I get all the time. People say, you know, I was married 3 years ago. Can I file for an annulment? I was married for 2 weeks. Can I file for an annulment? It depends. It depends on multiple factors. For instance, in legal speak, is the marriage void or voidable? These are things that you would have to explore with an attorney to determine. We're not going to get into that today. And then depending on the type of annulment, whether it's void or voidable, did you act within a reasonable period of time to sever the relationship? Again, these are very fact-intensive cases, and it's too comprehensive or too detailed to get into today. It is something that you're going to need to decide with an attorney.
Thank you, Gina. And then the final question I have for you is, will there be a record of the marriage if an annulment is processed?
That's another really common question. I get questions like, if I get an annulment, do I have to tell my new boyfriend or girlfriend that I was married before? And the answer is absolutely yes. Because first off, when you take out a marriage license, there's a public record that shows that a marriage license was taken out. Second, when you file for an annulment, you file in the court system, and those are public records. So if you don't tell your spouse that you were married in the past, even though the marriage never legally happened, it's possible, and I've actually ran across situations where this new spouse finds out that the spouse was married by going through some sort of a background check, an adoption, a foster care proceeding, something along those lines. They learned that their spouse was married previously through the public records. So my advice is always, even though the marriage is void or voidable, meaning it never happened, and the court determines that the marriage never legally happened, factually you were still married to this person. Factually, your new relationship can find out that you were married in the past. So err on the side of caution and disclose your prior marriage.
Thank you, Gina. Christy, I want to discuss the process of an annulment. So what is the process?
Well, the process is that you have to file a legal action. And it's a petition like it is for divorce. And in fact, one of your options is divorce, one of your options is legal separations, and one of your option is annulment. So you would file like you would any dissolution action or legal separation action. I think always the best policy is to plead in the alternative, which means to put an annulment, and then if that doesn't work, then you ask for a divorce so that you don't have to refile anything. It preserves your right if you aren't granted the annulment, and I use that term very carefully, aren't granted an annulment, that you can proceed on a dissolution action.
So is that process then faster than a divorce?
Not necessarily. I think a lot of people think that they can just mark that box and then we're done, and that's not the way it goes at all. You have to have some sort of hearing or finding from a judge, a judgment of annulment, and depending on your situation, that could take as long as a divorce, or maybe not, if the facts are I guess assured that it won't be that long.
To expedite the process, can the parties agree to an annulment?
That's a tricky question. Absolutely, the parties can agree to the annulment. However, it is not just simply up to the parties. The judge has to make a finding that the marriage is void or voidable. So yes, it helps the process, because if you can get an agreement, we can proceed in a way that is not so lengthy, and we can actually maybe do a default prove up on an issue like that. But those are very complicated issues, questions that you really need to consult with us about, because it's not that simple. Everybody thinks it's very simple. Like, I'm married in Vegas, I was drunk. Oh, all we have to do is agree to annul the marriage, and it's just not that simple at all.
So if I understand you correctly, even if the parties agree to an annulment, can the judge deny the annulment?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. That's why people need to be very careful, because they only have one shot at this. And it is a very fact intensive, as Gina pointed out, and it is a legal proceeding. You cannot avoid having a trial on this and having a judge make a ruling on it. So if this is really truly your avenue and what you want, you have to present your best case to the judge in order for the judge to find that the marriage was void.
So Christy, is there any way to avoid going to court or trial in an annulment then?
I would say no, absolutely not. I mean, this is not just merely pushing paperwork through. There has to be a trial. Now, again, if the parties agree, it may make that trial easier. But no, there's no way to avoid court for this.
Now, what about the opposite? What if the other side will not agree to an annulment? What then?
That makes it more complicated, because some of the basis for an annulment is, say, for instance, fraud. And if you're saying that the other side, defrauded you, then of course they may not agree to that. So then it becomes a much more intensive trial. And you just really need to present your best case. And I'll say it again, because you only have one shot at this.
So let's talk about if the annulment is granted. So if the annulment is granted, can one party get support orders?
No. So I think you have to be strategic, and you need to consult an attorney about what your options are and what is the best path for you. Because if you proceed on an annulment, it as Gina pointed out very well, that it makes it so the marriage never existed. So the rights that you would have if you were proceeding on a divorce may not be available to you on an annulment.
And what about assets? How are assets divided in an annulment?
They're not. All the judge is doing, all you're doing there is asking the court to make it so this never happened. So whatever assets you have are yours, whatever their assets are theirs. But if there's a dispute about assets, then you're going to have to go to civil court to sort that out, because it's like your marriage never existed. So then you're litigating in two courts. And again, these are issues and questions that you really need to discuss with us.
Okay, and what about, does the same statement and the same rule apply to joint debts?
Absolutely. The parties, get in joint assets and liability situations all the time. And again, those are things that you're going to have to deal with in a civil court if this marriage is annulled. If you're married and you're going through a dissolution action or a legal separation action, then those issues can be addressed in that proceeding, but not in an annulment.
So what if one party seeks the annulment, but the other side believes that or was under the impression that the marriage was valid? What rights does the party have?
Which party be?
So the party that believed that the marriage was valid.
Well, that's the trial. So the trial will be that one party felt that the marriage is void or voidable for some reason, and the other party is going to argue, no, I believe the marriage was valid. And it's up to the judge to determine whether or not, like, who wins, really? Who wins? Do you believe the party that thought they were married and for a valid reason, or do you believe the party who feels that the marriage was for some reason void or voidable? That's up to the judge.
And how does the concept of putative spouse fit into this?
Well, if it's a very fact intensive and situation. So it really depends on the person who thought the marriage was valid, whether or not, so let's give an example. So say, for instance, the person finds out that the other person was married and never got divorced, okay? It's gonna depend on when that party became aware of that. So if the party knew all along and then all of a sudden decides that, you know, that's grounds that they want an annulment, then I don't see a putative spouse situation in that regard. And so we're clear, a putative spouse is one that thinks that they were married and the marriage was valid, so they want certain rights because of that. And so I just think it's very fact intensive, and it's not a simple yes or no question for sure.
So then can a putative spouse then ask for support orders?
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay. But again, it's just not that simple. And I want to make that very clear to our viewers that, you know, and I hope it's clear so far that this is just not a simple issue at all. And it really requires a consultation to sit down and go through these facts and sift through them to see if this is the proper vehicle for you.
Perfect, thank you. So I have one final question for you that I received. Is an annulment cheaper than a divorce?
Maybe.
Okay.
I don't, you know, no, it could not be. It really depends. And, you know, in terms of your weighing your options, you know, it might be cheaper to go, say, for instance, a summary dissolution action, which is quite simple. You may not even need an attorney for that. You may be able to have a paralegal file and do your paperwork for you, instead of going through an annulment process, which could be a very big trial, as we're showing you. And it might be cheaper for you to explore another option. And again, those are issues that we can discuss with you about what is the best and most efficient, not only in terms of court time, but in terms of your financial time or your finances and your time. What's going to be the best process for you in this regard?
Thank you, Christy. Colleen, I want to bring you in on this, and I want to talk about who qualifies for an annulment.
Well, that's a really good question. And as if you can't tell from our common thread through all of us discussing this topic thus far, is that this is not an easy area of the law. This is not an easy area of family law. There is very limited bases for you to even to file for an annulment, to ask for an annulment. So it's very fact specific. It's fact driven. It's also because we can only achieve it getting in front of a judge, we have to be able to present the evidence too to support what you're requesting and under which grounds you're requesting it for. So I don't have a very specific answer like that maybe our viewers are looking for, but again, because this is not an area, or this is not a remedy that is given lightly by the judges, because public policy favors keeping a marriage intact and disfavors annulments, really, that it's hard to get a divorce. It's almost harder to get an annulment. So our suggestion is, do not wade into these waters by yourself. Don't tiptoe through them either. If you're contemplating or you believe that you may qualify for annulment, please contact an attorney. And as Christy said, let's weigh all your options. Let's go through all the different scenarios and find which vehicle is best suited for you.
What if the parties were married for a short time? Would you think that they automatically qualify for an annulment?
Not necessarily. Again, it all just depends. So that would be another, this is a very gray area. So you really need to speak with an attorney if you think that that you qualify for an annulment. An annulment, I think what people need to understand, it's not a quick and dirty divorce. It's not the easy way out here. You make a mistake, you marry the wrong person. I don't want to be married to him or her anymore. Let's get an annulment. It's not the easy way out of this, and it's not the cheapest way out of it. Least complicated. That's not the situation at all, and I think that's a common misconception of annulments.
What if one party cheated during the marriage?
Well, I am sorry that happened for one, but that it does not necessarily mean an automatic annulment in this situation. Like I said, there's very limited bases upon which someone could plead for an annulment or request an annulment. Fraud is one of them, and we need to have a conversation with you regarding cheating, and whether or not that would fall under one of the umbrellas or one of the requirements for an annulment.
And I know Christy mentioned or started talking about the concept of putative spouse, but what if one party was married, divorced, but the divorce was not finalized?
So that could qualify as something called bigamy. That's when you're married to two people and that's illegal. So that would be a void marriage. So we would also need just to take a look at it, but that may be one of the facts that would qualify for an annulment.
Okay, and what if one party has a lot of debt and the other party does not want to be responsible for it, or found out that the party A, so let me rephrase, party A has debt, party B did not know, but after marriage, party B found out that party A has a lot of debt and does not want to be responsible for it. Is that grounds for an annulment?
Probably not in that situation. Unfortunately, that happens a lot in divorce cases as well. So, because, like I said before, that public policy disfavors divorces, and probably even more so with annulments. You have to have something pretty extreme. The way to think about it is something really extreme that a court's going to find, okay, this is where an annulment is appropriate. So just because someone came in with debt that the other spouse didn't know about, probably is not going to qualify for an annulment unless there's something else going on or there's some other fact. It really just depends, but unfortunately that's not uncommon even in divorces.
What about same scenario, but party A this time has a criminal record?
I think that's also going to depend upon what kind of criminal record. Like, okay, so he's got a drawer full of unpaid parking tickets. Is that going to qualify for annulment? Probably not. You find out that maybe he or she committed some sort of, I don't even know, an atrocious crime, and they served jail time at one point. Would that qualify for an annulment? Maybe. It just depends. And whether or not that would fall under, like I said, we only have a very few set of boxes to plead in front of the court, whether or not that would qualify under something like fraud.
Okay, what about scenarios where one party married the other for immigration purposes?
That also is something that happens, or we hear about quite often, and that may or may not, it may qualify for a basis to file and request for an annulment. So it just depends. We would need to get more information and more facts. This is all fact driven. And I know that these answers probably aren't as clear cut as some people would like them to be. But again, this is a very uncommon area of the law. This is not something that when we're in the courtrooms every single day that you see an annulment case getting shuffled through and they're in the mix with child support and spouse support, custody and visitation. It's rare. It doesn't happen that often. And so we have to be very strategic in what we're presenting to the court and making sure that what you're looking for, what your end result or what your goals are, that we can do that with the vehicles that we have.
Thank you, Colleen. And then I have one final permutation of that. What if one party lied, for example, about wanting to have children, and after the marriage, the party B finds out that party A does not want to have children? They lied. What happens then?
Well, that actually has, that is also a more common set of facts that we've heard dealing with the issues of annulment, and that may qualify under fraud, under the guise of fraud, or under, not guise, I shouldn't say that, but under that box of fraud that we can check off. But so that's all going to be determined by the judge, whether or not the judge is going to feel that under that specific set of facts that perhaps you wanted children and you were led to believe that your spouse wanted children as well. You get married and you find out that maybe they're incapable of having children, or they just don't want to have children. And that's one of the reasons why people get married, is to start a family. So ultimately the judge would have to make that determination as to whether or not that would classify as an annulment.
Thank you, Colleen. And I know we presented a lot of scenarios because these are common scenarios that we get, but is it fair to say that based on your experience with the current judges, it's a huge factor in determining whether the judges are going to grant the annulment or not based on the facts that you have as an attorney? Is that?
Can you repeat the question?
So
based on the facts, what the judge
based on your experience,
yeah.
Is it fair to say that knowing the judges in the courtroom obviously gives you an insight as to how they're likely to rule on an annulment?
I think yes, and I think that's very true in not just in annulments, but on all the issues that we have, because we're all in front of these family law judges on a regular basis. And I know we've talked about in our prior podcasts being able to speak the legal speak and being able to parse out the information that we know, and in particular just knowing the judges. Like, we know their backgrounds, a lot of their backgrounds. We know which ones were prosecutors, we know which ones were were public defenders, which ones were business attorneys, and what kind of information they really hold on to. So I think it's because we're in front of them so frequently, and being able to present information in the way that they find it digestible and in the manner they like to receive it too. There's a difference too with that. I think that's a huge advantage for our clients.
Thank you, Colleen. Gina, I know we talked about a lot of scenarios that may or may not qualify for an annulment. So can you give us a couple of examples of who qualifies for an annulment?
Sure. It sounds like you're trying to pin us down, Bishoy. So let me see if I can give you the clearest, simple answer possible. There's two types of an annulment. There's void and voidable. And so the examples and the facts depend on which theory of law you're going under. If a marriage is void, the most common would be something along the lines of, my spouse was married before, never got a divorce, and married me. The rights of me, the person who was injured, depend upon the facts. I may or may not have the ability to go after spousal support or to acquire property, depending upon the facts, which is what Christy was getting to. But one common scenario is the marriage never happened because the spouse was married previously. That's a void marriage. Never happened. And then we have what's called voidable. And Colleen touched upon that quite a bit. That would be the scenario of fraud. Typically it's fraud. I said I wanted children. I lied to my spouse. My spouse has now decided or has learned that I lied. Or I wanted a green card. I lied to my spouse, married my spouse, and now my spouse has found out. The standard is a fraud or misrepresentation was committed, that it went to the heart of the marriage, and had my spouse known that I had lied before I married him or her, he or she wouldn't have married me. That requires the party who's injured to go into court within a reasonable amount of time. As you can see, there's a lot of gray area, which is why we're all kind of hemming and hawing, because each and every person who is married and believes that they have an issue of annulment is going to have a different fact pattern. It may look the same, but it's so fact intensive, we cannot give you a very specific answer, Bishoy. The best answer we can give you is if somebody thinks that they have been injured, they definitely need to see an attorney, and they should not wait, because waiting could prejudice their rights. It could make them not qualify for the annulment based upon a lapse of time.
Thank you, Gina. And I do want to take this opportunity to thank the legal panel again for taking the time out of their day to walk us through an annulment. I do want to remind the viewers and the participants that if you have any questions that were left unanswered, please make sure that you send them to us. This podcast will be posted on our social media websites, Facebook, YouTube, and our website. And then if you have any reservations or any, if you think you qualify for an annulment, reach out to us, get a consultation, and we'll walk you through whether we believe you qualify or not. Other than that, I usually give the participants an opportunity to, or the legal panel to say a couple of final words. So I'm going to start with you, Colleen. Any final words for our participants today?
Other than if you think that this applies to your situation, do not try to do this on your own. Just call us, get a consultation, find out what your options are, and get as much information as you can. Because like I said, this is not the easy way out if that's what you're looking for in order to end your marriage.
Thank you, Colleen. Christy, anything to add to that?
Well, I like what Colleen said, that this is not a quick and dirty. This is not a vehicle that I hope we've made clear that is going to make any of this process easier for you. I think the viewers need to understand that, there are a lot of things affected by whether or not this marriage was valid. It affects support. It affects child support, or it doesn't affect child support. It affects spousal support and so forth. But, I just think everybody needs to understand that you really need to figure out your strategy in this regard and make sure that this is the appropriate vehicle for you.
Thank you, Christy. Gina, any final words?
I think Christy hit the nail on the head, so to speak. It's a strategic legal decision. Even if you qualify for an annulment, you may or may not want to go through with it because it affects your rights so profoundly. So as the entire panel has said, consult an attorney immediately.
Thank you guys for that. And again, if you need a consultation, you can call us at 951-587-0505, or you can reach us via email at info@temeculadivorce.com, or simply visit our website, www.temeculadivorce.com, and request a consultation. Thank you guys again, and God bless.
God bless.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.